Kawhi is hilarious for so many reasons, okay? It's not just the goofy-ass laugh from half a decade ago or the permanent awkwardness. He genuinely got to be the biggest bait in the entire sport. The Kawhi cycle has been firmly in place since he left Toronto, and it barely ever changes. Hoop during the regular season, and then as soon as the playoffs come around, his knees fall apart, and he either misses most of the Clippers' playoff games or tries to play through the injury, and they get beat up. Since he signed with LA, he's had one healthy playoff run, and that was his first season there when the Clippers blew a 3-1 lead to the Nuggets. In the 2021 playoffs, he was having an all-time great playoff campaign before getting hurt midway through the conference semifinals against the Jazz. He was putting up like 30 points, 7 rebounds, and 4 assists on 57, 39, 88 shooting splits. The Clippers probably make the finals if he doesn't go down early, to be honest. Then the next season, he doesn't even play at all. His last 2 playoffs, he failed to make it more than halfway through a single series. He's been playing with Clippers fans' emotions for 5 years straight, and I ain't gonna lie, it's not hard to see why they keep falling for it. Every time he come back on the court, he somehow still look elite, even though if you do an X-ray on his knees right now, it would probably look like grits in there. He just came back a few weeks ago and played his first games of the season, and he somehow looks nastier than ever before. Not really from a pure athletic standpoint, obviously, but his handle is smoother and sharper than ever. In his limited minutes, it's clear he's still more than a capable player, which is wild considering the sheer number of injuries he's had. He shouldn't really be hooping anymore at all if we're being serious. Obviously, he's probably going to play for as long as he can because he's getting hundreds of millions, but logically, he's never going to be anywhere near reliable. Kawhi appears to have a degenerative knee condition. A degenerative knee condition means that the affected tissues and organs basically get worse over time and they're pretty much permanently damaged. They're never going to fully heal. They're never going to perfectly recover. You're stuck with constant inflammation, constant swelling, constant flare-ups, and constant pain. We all make load management jokes when it comes to Kawhi because of how much rest he gets. I mean, he usually only plays like 50 to 60 games a season. But the fact of the matter is he actually medically needs the rest. He needs it. It's not like he's just re-injuring the same leg over and over. His knee is generally just permanently done up, and the only way he can continue playing is if he gives it time to calm down whenever there's too much strain put on it. Kawhi was diagnosed with tendinopathy. I think that's how you say it. Whatever. He was diagnosed with that shit and possibly other knee problems all the way back in 2017 when he was still on the Spurs, which is part of what led to him falling out with the organization in the first place. Allegedly, they didn't want to pay him as much as he probably wanted because apparently the team told him his knee problems wouldn't be going away and they'd be taking a huge risk if they threw a shit ton of money at him. He had already missed almost an entire season with knee problems, and there was so much uncertainty around his future that San Antonio got rid of him. According to others, though, Kawhi's uncle had a huge influence on Kawhi's decision-making around the time and wanted him to move to a bigger market. Some sources said that the Spurs didn't really even view the knee problem as a big enough issue to just throw away their franchise player, and it was more so Kawhi who drifted away from them. Whichever one is true, it doesn't matter. Either way, the relationship crumbled and Kawhi ended up in Toronto. Of course, afterwards, he led the Raptors to a title, but in the long run, San Antonio was right based on how shit has gone in LA. That one Toronto title tells us a lot about what could have been, though, and it's pretty sad. Kawhi is one of the closest things to a perfect basketball player you could get. Elite, efficient, 3-level scorer, tight handle, lockdown defender with size and speed to guard anybody from the low, quick niggas like Curry to the big athletic monsters like Giannis. Massive hands, incredible awareness and IQ. He's something you make up in a game. They had to nerf him with the oatmeal knees because he was one of the most demonic two-way creations in the history of the sport. His resume right now is already sturdy enough despite the fact that he's been dragged back by injuries half his career. He's a 2-time champion, a 2-time finals MVP, 2-time defensive player of the year, was top 3 in MVP voting twice, All-NBA first team 3 times. He has a lot in his locker, but you could argue he's the biggest what-if ever because a healthy Kawhi changes the entire landscape of the NBA. The Spurs were putting belt to ass in Golden State before Zaza fucked up Kawhi's ankle in Game 1 of the conference finals in 2017. We're talking about the Warriors' God squad potentially losing before even making it to the finals. Then on top of that, Kawhi possibly doesn't leave San Antonio at all since it was the turmoil over his knee problems that made him leave in the first place. Even if he does still leave and goes to Toronto and then back to his hometown in LA like he allegedly always wanted to do, we're looking at a Clippers team that isn't built around 2 cripples. The 2021 playoffs absolutely turns out much differently for starters. You can play the what-if game for Kawhi in hella different ways, but the fact of the matter is, his legacy is probably one of the strangest we'll ever see in the history of the league. He'll probably retire without really approaching 20,000 points, and yet the consensus is that there were multiple different points in the last decade where he was a top 3 player on the planet. He won't go down as one of those what-ifs that are pretty much entirely potential-based, like D. Rose. Sure, Rose got an MVP, but his ascension was cut off at 23. We never got a true glimpse of what prime Rose would have looked like. We got numerous peaks at the kind of monster Kawhi was, multiple extended flashes, but no real stretch of dominant years like so many other all-time greats have, because almost every elite season was immediately followed by a long period sidelined by injury and load management. So what do you even do with him on an all-time list? You can't really put him with a guy like T-Mac, who also had injury issues but never won a chip and absolutely was not the two-way demon Kawhi is. But do you really have him as high as like the D-Wades? How much are we valuing peak here? I've never really been one to put too much stock into hypotheticals, but with Kawhi, it's less hypothetical and more of what the reality of the situation is when he plays. I don't know. It's also kind of interesting to watch the way Kawhi's injuries have forced his evolution as a player. If you ask people what his overall peak was, most would say the 16-17 season on the Spurs because he was much more athletic back then before a lot of the injuries piled up, which allowed him to still be a defensive player of the year level defender while also being a force offensively. It was probably the best two-way Kawhi we ever saw at any point. 2019, though, he had improved offensively and was still an elite enough defender to lead one of the most locked down defenses in NBA history. Playoff Kawhi that year is probably who I'd say is the best version of him overall, despite the fact that I still think 16-17 Kawhi was the better two-way force.
Go rewatch that Philly series, bro. He was giving Ben, Tobias, and Jimmy hell. Them boys ain't know what to do with them. Kawhi was dead ass turning them every which way. I would have left the Sixers too. Don't worry, Jimmy. I feel you. Straight barbecue, bro.
If we're being honest with ourselves, Kawhi doesn't have much time left. He's what? 33, 34. I don't expect him to last much longer than a couple more seasons. He'll retire with a career full of question marks and hypotheticals, but I do feel like despite all the flack he gets for being so fragile, many will still remember him for that Toronto run in 2019 and those days back on the Spurs where he was a defensive nightmare. He was never the most explosive or flashy. He was never the most exciting, but he was still incredible to watch. And as time goes by, a lot of us can't help but wish we got to see more of him.